When a woman senses that your emotional energy has shifted, she feels it before she ever admits it. There's a subtle change in the air, the tone of your voice, the lack of urgency in your responses, the calmness that used to be replaced by intensity. You're no longer reacting, explaining, or trying to prove anything. That quiet detachment speaks louder than any argument ever could. Because when you're no longer emotionally invested, your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects back to her everything she once ignored. You see, emotional detachment is not about pretending you don't care. It's about reaching a state where you no longer need to care in the same way. It's a form of emotional liberation when your peace becomes more valuable than your point. And that's what shakes her at her core, because she realizes the power has shifted. The person who once sought her approval, who once reacted to every emotional cue, now operates from stillness. That's not weakness, that's strength disguised as silence. This moment forces her to confront an uncomfortable truth. Attention is replaceable, but emotional presence is not. When that presence is gone, nothing she says can recreate it. She begins to feel a sense of emptiness, not because you withdrew, but because you no longer orbit her emotional world. She can't manipulate calmness, she can't argue with indifference, and she can't control detachment. That's what makes it so powerful. When you reach this level of emotional self-control, you stop trying to be understood and start valuing your inner peace. And that's when the dynamic changes completely, because sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is made in silence. When a woman realizes you're truly done, her mind doesn't rest. It becomes her battlefield. She starts to replay every conversation, every silence, every little shift in your tone, searching for clues she missed. It's not love that drives this, it's the need for understanding. The human mind cannot easily accept uncertainty. It needs closure, and when she doesn't get it, her thoughts spiral. She starts analyzing details that once seemed meaningless, trying to find the exact moment when your emotional withdrawal began. This is the phase where the power of your silence begins to unfold. You're not explaining, not reacting, not defending, and that absence of validation leaves her with nothing to hold on to. She begins to see herself through your quiet detachment, and that reflection isn't always kind. What she's really chasing now isn't you, it's the version of herself that existed when your attention was still hers. The texts she rereads, the memories she revisits, they're all attempts to recreate emotional certainty in a space where it no longer exists. Psychologically, this is the mind's way of trying to regain control. The more unanswered questions she has, the deeper she falls into reflection. It's no longer about fixing the relationship. It's about fixing the narrative. Because when someone's emotional hold over you breaks, it doesn't just end the relationship, it disrupts their sense of self. That's why she replays it all, not to remember you, but to remember who she was when you still cared. And that's the irony. The more she replays, the more she realizes how much your absence reveals. Because sometimes it's not the words you said that echo the loudest. It's the silence that follows after them. When a woman first realizes you're no longer emotionally available, it's not her heart that feels the first blow, it's her ego. The ego is that inner voice that thrives on control, validation, and reassurance. It doesn't want to lose, it doesn't want to be replaced. So when you stop giving her the emotional feedback she's used to, the attention, the pursuit, the explanations, it's not heartbreak she feels at first, it's disbelief. The shock comes from realizing she no longer holds the same emotional influence she once did. This moment triggers a deep psychological discomfort. She may start to question herself, not from a place of love, but from a place of wounded pride. Why isn't he reacting? Why doesn't he care anymore? Did I lose my power over him? These are ego-driven thoughts, not emotional reflections, because the ego's greatest fear is not losing someone, it's losing significance. When your detachment shows her that her words, moods, or actions no longer affect you, It dismantles the emotional hierarchy she unconsciously built. The truth is, most relationships operate with subtle power dynamics, and when that balance breaks, the one who loses control feels the sting first. The ego starts to disguise itself as heartbreak, but what it's really mourning is the loss of dominance, the loss of validation. Only later, when the ego quiets down, does the heart begin to process what truly happened. That's the beauty and the irony of emotional growth. You reach a point where your peace hurts someone's pride more than your presence ever did. And when that happens, you'll understand something profound. Not every tear is about love. Sometimes it's just the ego realizing it can't win anymore. When the balance of emotional power shifts, confusion begins to replace control. A woman who once dictated the rhythm of your communication, who knew exactly what to say to get a reaction, how to pull you back in, how to provoke emotion, suddenly finds herself facing silence. You no longer explain yourself, you no longer justify, and you no longer chase. That calm detachment forces her into unfamiliar territory because she can't read you anymore. The emotional script she once relied on no longer works. This moment is psychologically disorienting because it dismantles the illusion of control. She begins to reach out, not necessarily because she misses you, but because she needs to test whether she still matters. Every ignored message, every unreturned call, every moment of composure from your side adds to her internal confusion. She's no longer sure if she has lost you or if she ever truly had you, and that uncertainty becomes haunting. What she doesn't realize is that your silence isn't punishment, it's clarity. You've simply stopped engaging in emotional negotiations that go nowhere. And that, to someone used to control, feels like chaos. The silence becomes louder than any argument because it exposes everything that words once covered. In that space, she begins to experience the consequence of her own patterns. The emotional distance she once created now surrounds her. There's a moment when she finally understands control built on emotional dependency is temporary. The one who can stay grounded in silence will always hold the real power, because in relationships it's never about who speaks the loudest, it's about who can remain calm when the noise begins. In that calmness, that's where strength truly lives. After the confusion fades and the silence settles in, something interesting begins to happen. The reaction turns into reflection. The emotional chaos that once fueled her need to control or explain starts to lose its grip. This is when she begins to see things more clearly, often for the first time. The moments she dismissed, the efforts she overlooked, the emotional presence she took for granted, they start replaying in her mind, but this time through a different lens. Reflection is uncomfortable because it reveals truth without the protection of pride. When emotions calm down, the mind becomes brutally honest. She begins to notice the patterns, how she used withdrawal as power, how she tested your patience, how she mistook your consistency for weakness. What once made her feel dominant now feels hollow. The silence that once frustrated her becomes a mirror reflecting her own behavior. It's not about guilt, it's about realization, the recognition that control is never a substitute for connection. And in that quiet space of realization, respect begins to grow, not the superficial kind that comes from fear of loss, but the genuine kind that comes from understanding strength. Your calmness, your decision not to argue, not to chase, not to prove, it begins to stand out. She sees that your silence was never indifference, it was self-respect. That's the shift no one talks about when reflection replaces reaction and admiration replaces resentment. Because once a person sees what they couldn't when they had you, they finally understand what it means to lose peace disguised as love. In the end, your silence teaches what your words never could, that maturity isn't about winning the argument, it's about outgrowing the need to have one. When you finally walk away, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in peace, something shifts. At first, she might think your silence is temporary. She assumes you'll come back like before, but when time passes and you remain unmoved, When she sees that your life continues with calmness and clarity, that's when the reality sinks in. That's when the emotional awakening begins, because it's in your absence that she starts to truly see your presence. Absence creates space, and space forces truth to surface. All the small things she dismissed suddenly gain weight. The way you listened, the way you understood her moods, the way you carried responsibility without demanding recognition, these details start to echo in her mind. She realizes that what she once labeled as ordinary was, in fact, rare. It's not that she didn't know your value before, it's that she didn't have to feel the consequences of losing it. Now she does. That's the irony of emotional maturity. We often recognize significance only through loss. Your absence becomes her teacher. It teaches her patience, humility, and the cost of taking genuine energy for granted. She begins to understand that not everyone's presence is replaceable. Some energies stay imprinted long after the connection fades. And for you, this is the moment of transformation. You've learned that walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means honoring yourself enough to stop pouring into what no longer grows. That's the kind of strength that doesn't scream, it radiates. Because, in the end, your absence will speak louder than your presence ever did. And sometimes that silence becomes the very thing that teaches someone what love was supposed to feel like.